thoughts, and I don't have enough on it, is I'm still back to uh, what people can do. And I was talking with Joanna, and I used the word courage, and and she did not react well to that.
Courage in what context?
In the grand game, right?
Okay.
Of we know what, at least I know. Okay, courage versus perspective is the thing, the giant thing in my head, the battle. And from my perspective, I know the things that I can do to gain power in my life.
Okay.
Right? Do I do them? The courage to, believe in something greater, that kind of thing. And that kind of courage enables the proletariat to rise up, basically.
We're talking about an intellectual courage, courage of thought or action.
Well, yeah, I think I am talking about courage of thought, and I need to figure out a way to make that courage of spirit, right? Because we live in it. We're more academics than anything, and opinion is good. And I know the fight these days, it feels like it's about opinion, right? So the fight with our common man, not the fight against tyranny or whatever. It's all about opinion, and I decide whether I like you or not, whether I like your opinion, not your actions.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had privilege to learn about those things, but when I discuss them, I feel it goes over people's heads. Now, maybe I don't discuss them well, but also I don't think people dive into that. The more I talk to people, the more I realize they are not as introspective as I am, which is a dangerous path, because that starts making me feel better than other people, which is, I know, untrue, intellectually at least. Anyway.
Well, I think sometimes, it's for some reason the old joke comes to mind of the little child who asks her dad, "Where did I come from?" And dad he reacts like in a scared sort of way, and then he tells this elaborate story about birds and bees and all of that stuff. And the punchline is, "No, Dad, Johnny down the street comes from Toledo. Where do I come from?" Sometimes you ask a question to people and you're on a completely different level than they are.
Yeah.
You're talking about, whatever the concept may be, freedom. Well, that can mean a lot of different things to a lot of people. You ask someone if you are in favor of freedom, probably most people would say sure.
Kind of free, yeah.
Except when it's free for, if someone on the left is asked, is it freedom to allow the Nazis to march in front of your house? They might say no.
Right.
But there are different ways of viewing each topic, depending upon where the person's coming from. I've run into that problem in organizations I've worked in, because when I was most recently working in a school, I talked with people about learning and education. I'm thinking in the broadest, most abstract of terms. And my view is that, everyone should be thinking in the larger picture of what learning really is. And in that world, for me, that means helping people to understand how they can best learn on their own.
Right.
You're guiding them, but all the learning takes place individually, and the educators are simply guiding people to, just like a coach would coach someone to, don't lead with your right foot, lead with your left foot, something like that. A coach in an educational environment would say, here are things that would be of help to you to read if that's the direction you want to go in. But for the people I'm talking to, the teachers I'm talking to, it's about the lesson plan and the goals and objectives. And you know, you kind of throw your hands up and say, well, I'm not on that plane. I'm on a different plane
Yeah,
altogether.
yeah.
So,
That leads me to the what do we give? Everybody has a different perspective and everybody has a different approach, and it's very difficult for me. I try as hard as I can to empathize and visualize that, but I know it'll be impossible all the time. But it's the this is where we edit this part out. I have a good one of when do we give people the opportunity to be brave and courageous? And I mention this in terms of the society we're in now. You get a chance to feel powerful and kick down, and you get a chance to assert yourself in some way, but it's usually somebody else's idea.
mhm,
When do you get a chance to prove yourself?
yeah.
And this leads to the second thing that I've been thinking about is in general and just in political terms, I have a feeling that the Republican Party is going to become the party of the people. And what I mean by that is if the Democrats keep blatantly showing that, it's a two-party duopoly system, right?
Mhm.
And they reforming the Democratic Party, maybe it's still possible. We've had so many defeats, it's hard to imagine.
Mhm.
But I do see the Republican Party reacting. Now they're reacting to right-wing populism, which has some truths, but can also be just as easily hijacked and typically is. So I see the Republican Party responding more towards the needs of the people, not in a way that I approve of, but they're responding. So I can't separate that.
I would qualify that by saying the desires of the people, not necessarily the needs.
Absolutely, absolutely.
It's the desire is to lower everybody's taxes. The
Right,
need is to raise taxes to pay for public programs and
right.
infrastructure and welfare and so forth. Yeah, that's interesting. I was struck in the New York Times this morning. There was an op-ed about why Republicans fear voters, and the underlying thing being gerrymandering and voter suppression.
Okay.
And um, when you look at a democracy, I mean, for a democracy to function properly, the vast majority of people should express their opinion. They should have, you know, we should know how people feel. In the past, the only way we've been able to do that is by having a ballot box and sticking, a ballot into it. We still have that as the final delineation of how people feel. Unfortunately, not everybody is expressing themselves. So if you have only a small percentage of the people who are casting votes, you're really not a democracy. The democracy requires at least a simple majority, but I would say a plurality of people to cast the vote. I mean, if you belong to an organization and you were having a big decision to be made, let's say we're going to buy a new building, all right, and you hold a meeting, and out of I don't know, out of 100 members, only 20 show up.
Has no
Would
legitimacy.
you go ahead and have the vote and say, well, the majority won? No. I mean, somebody who really values democracy would say, no, we need to hear from everybody on this before we make a decision. And it's what I find really odd is that if you believe in democracy, you should not only endorse it, you should demand that people express their opinion. You can't opt out. You have to say how you feel if you're a part
Right.
of a democracy. We demand that you say what's on your mind, and the foundation for this is the idea that when everyone expresses an opinion, when you get all of those different perspectives, you are more likely to come up with the appropriate, best decision. And I believe in that. I think that, if if I'm going to do something and I have lots of opinions, I'm more likely to come to the truth. There has to be something more than just uninformed opinion, though. You have to, if we're talking about something, technical or complex, just getting a man on the street opinion about, how should we build this satellite? Well, unless you know something about it, your opinion doesn't count as much. But a democracy should be working towards a greater number of people involved in each decision. The more people who are involved and the more we value, critical perspectives, the better we are. Apparently, the Republicans are afraid of that. It's not that just that they don't believe that's the best way of doing it. They're afraid of it. And from their point of view, the more riffraff you have involved in the decision, less likely you are to come up with anything good. So
now I see that same, you keep saying Republicans, there are a vast majority of us that also believe it is also true.
Oh, sure. Yeah, but I was referencing the article where they were focused on Republican voter suppression. But you're right; it's true on both sides. When I have more problems actually talking with liberals than I do conservatives. I know where the conservatives are coming from, and I know how to present an argument, in a way that is not insulting to them. But with liberals, if I say I don't support the Black Lives Matter organization, I get all kinds of crap about that. And I said, well, hold on. I think Black Lives Matter, certainly. It's just this organization called Black Lives Matter that puts out the posters, those people, I don't support them.
I had the same view with BDS. Now,
with what?
BDS, boycott, divest, and sanction.
Okay.
Where there were at the time, there were two BDSs, really. There was an actual specified organization that had actual written demands. And one of them was the full right of return of Palestinians to Israel. And if that were to happen, the Palestinians would outnumber the Israelis or something like that. And Israel would it would actually cease to exist, and they would rename it Palestine.
Right.
It was an existential threat. And that part, the American narrative got jumbled because we're like, oh, well, we're Americans and boycotting and marching and things. These are inalienable rights to us, even though I don't think we know how to do it. But that we feel they are ours. And we were conflating the right to protest with these specific aims. And outside of America, everybody else understood what that movement was. Mm-hmm. We confused it with just a democratic thing. They understood it was a road to genocide. Mm-hmm. So,
well, it's interesting if you're the person in power and you take some sort of census, some sort of poll, and people come up with an answer that doesn't make sense, and you feel like you're in a position of authority where not only political authority but intellectual authority, and it's not such a good idea. That's where the rub comes, where if you give everybody a vote on whether we should have a 3-day work week, people are going to probably say yes, but is that a good idea? Well, maybe not so much,
Now we're talking about technocracy. Is that the right word?
Yeah.
Those who have the most knowledge rule,
right?
Which, again, there's never a good answer. I think that's the other thing of people on our side is we can't be fundamentalists either.
Yeah.
And we have to understand that what it truly means to be flawed.
Yeah. Well, part of it is the process itself. And this is my problem with the two-party system, that when you have two parties and everything is a binary choice, you choose the team you're on and you're almost compelled to go the way the group is going. So if you're a Republican, you're going to be on the pro-life side. If you're a Democrat, you're going to be on the pro-choice side. Well, that's not really an appropriate way of going about this. That each issue should be evaluated on its own merit. But we have gone to a we've evolved to a point of having um, all of our issues come down to this simple binary choice: are you blue or are you red? You know, so if you're on the Democratic side, but you think you're against abortion on demand, well, you're not valued by either side.
What
You're
about the
kind of left
silent majority?
about a silent majority.
The
What?
silent majority. There is one. The non-voters are
Well,
greater
I
than.
think a lot of those people are caught up in that, understanding that this is just a game that people are playing, you know, and I think in a lot of cases it's worse on the left. I don't know how much email you're getting these days from
Wow.
political people. I got email today, and one email says, you know, great news in Pennsylvania, Biden's ahead. The next one says Biden collapses. You know, so I'm getting from allegedly from people on the left, I'm getting two conflicting stories. Well, why am I getting that? Well, the people who say Biden's collapsing want my money,
Right.
and that's all they want. So they're going to put out the message that they think is going to get my money.
Right.
So I I don't trust them. I don't trust anybody on the left. I don't trust the DNC, and I don't trust any of the organizations that are in support of Democratic candidates. I want to look at the candidates, and in the end, I'll pick one or the other. But what it causes me to do in terms participation, at least in terms of making donations, I'm not participating anymore. I'm not going to give any money to them because that's they will continue to give me reason to give money even when I don't need to,
Right.
because they want my money. It's not a matter of what they believe in or whatever.
And I would I
It's
would frame a narrative that I'm trying to stick with is, I'm not going to just be reactive. If somebody asks for my money, I'm not going to give that to them. But on the other hand, I'm going to go seek out the races where I might make a difference. There's a few, now none of these are my races in my districts, but there are some that I can continue to give money to, but not in a reactive way. You
mm,
have to spend that time. Now, I have made it an interest. I know I might be part of, you and I might be part of the 5% of people that find this stuff interesting. Most people want to run away from it.
right.
And so that's my choice. And I'm wondering what everybody else's choice is. But this also reminds me of I've met maybe two people in my life who are raised without TV. And I immediately distrusted them. But I'm starting to think, well, what does that mean? Why did I distrust him like that?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you were raised without TV, I think, for the first 4 years of your life, but yeah,
I guess I was fortunate enough where I had other things too.
yeah,
It was exposure. It's the same reason why, like losing weight, you don't go on a dramatic diet. You just increase the number of vegetables you eat.
right,
That's really it.
right, yeah,
Nothing glamorous, and it's nothing extreme. You just add more things.
no,
And if I had I was lucky enough to have many different types of information and people.
mm,
And when you are limited by your choices are limited, then your imagination is limited.
yeah. Well,
And
the partisanship has gotten so pervasive, I guess, that it makes a lot of things political that shouldn't be political. I mean, the COVID-19 is the primary example, but there are other things as well. Climate change becomes a political choice.
right,
What the hell? I don't understand everything about climate change, but I don't look to politicians to inform me about it. Even Al Gore, I don't look, I don't look for him to give me accurate information, because these people have interests that are not consistent with science oftentimes. But it seems like every issue, if you support the orchestra, Well, you must be one of those liberal Democrats. Well, what the hell's that got to do, you know, with the you know, why do we have to make everything either or? And so in terms of getting different information, I would like to hear, I tune in every week to hear what David Brooks has to say about the week's news on PBS, because he's a conservative, but he's also a very bright guy who articulates his opinion without demagoguery. And I want to hear what he has to say. I don't always agree with him, but I want to hear that side, articulated. I listen to George Will. I think once again he's a very bright man. I don't agree with him on fundamentals, but I want to hear what that perspective is. But aside from a few people, I can't hear anything from the other side except just absolute crap.
Right.
It's just partisanship on every issue that comes up. It doesn't matter what it is. It's like there's a new news, there's a hurricane. Well, let's see, are we for it or against it? Wait a minute. There's some things that don't have anything to do with this red blue war you've got going on. There's other things besides this,
Right.
that
If I get the opportunity to talk to common people, and we can skip past the big narrative,
yeah,
I do find more in common, and if we can get past those things,
yeah.
but that first step is harder for me. Um,
Mm.
I'm reminded of the Keep Louisville Weird campaign,
Mm-hmm.
and I at the beginning I thought that was one of the most effective things and one of the most brightest things I've ever seen, where have pride in making your own decisions.
Right.
It was a keep local, buy local, stay local kind of thing, but it was, pride in that. It was pride in, you know what, I'm going to follow my own path, and you can make fun of me if you want,
Right.
but I'm not scared anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So I would like to see that again, but I don't know. Maybe that. Do you think the Keep Louisville Weird campaign how is it going, and do you think it could get stronger, or has it been co-opted and dispersed?
I think it's become pretty mainstream. I don't think that the title necessarily reflects the reality of people's opinions. That what may have been considered weird when they first started has now become much more accepted as this is fine, whether it's in restaurants or clothing stores or whatever it might be. That if it's unique, if it's you know off the ordinary, that's okay. So the perspective or the attitude, I guess, towards those businesses is not that they are other; it's that they are us. I, so I don't know whether the movement itself, whether they're getting more members or less members or whatever. I think probably the pandemic has affected a lot of those businesses because they were generally smaller and
Right.
sole proprietorships. It's probably hurt them a lot. So um, I don't know if I can answer your question precisely, but it's still around. It's still it's kind of like Leo, the Louisville eccentric observer, which is not so eccentric.
Yeah, it's not so eccentric anymore.
Yeah, really. But it's from most things that are mainstream today were considered far out, wacko in the past. You didn't. What we're doing right now would have been an extremely nerdy thing to do 5 years ago. With a Zoom meeting, people would have rolled their eyes at it. But so people will accept things. But I think it's important to get a lot of different perspectives, and I feel like I'm missing that
Mm.
because I can discuss politics with you, but I have a hard time talking with others, both on the left and the right, because folks want to be offended by a different perspective. You know, if you don't agree with them up front and just nod your head and say, uh-huh, they want to confront you. They, you know, it's like they're looking for a reason to confront you. I mentioned the Black Lives Matter business. I got a lot of grief from the guys in my men's group about that. That I said, you know, I can't support Black Lives Matter. That's all they heard. They didn't
Right.
hear that I don't support these individuals because I don't even know who they are. I don't know where I'm not going to send them money because I don't know where the money's going to. Maybe somebody's getting rich off of it. It's kind of like, you know, you hear a preacher on TV, from some mega church, and he's saying all kinds of nice things, but the underlying message is send me money. And then you find out he owns 6 jet planes and, you know, a 20 million square foot house. It's like, wait a minute.
Would they have responded differently had you phrased it in a way similar to what you were saying, but okay, let's go find the Black-owned businesses in Louisville and put it on a list and then take my shopping list and see what I can buy from them.
Yeah.
Will you help me do that? Even though you know what I just said a minute ago probably triggered you very strongly.
Yeah.
Would that have played, or is it too far gone?
Well, you're right that, you know, I probably don't express it in a way that they can easily accept, but that's the problem. They won't listen to another. You know, when you hear someone expresses an opinion, you immediately make a binary choice of that they're with me or they're against me. Whereas the opinion may be, you know, entirely, it's either neutral or it might be coming from a completely different direction. And it doesn't really necessarily have to be diametrically opposed to you. It's just a different way of viewing things. And I find it, you know, very problematic to get into conversations. I think that's why I've enjoyed doing these things with you, because you know, you understand some of my quirks. You've had to put up with them all your life, and you know, you know when I'm open to new ideas and when I'm not. And I try to make sure that I'm listening, you know,
Right.
and I don't get that treatment from too many people.
True.
It's the conversations are usually banal of, yeah, Trump's an idiot, right? You know, the Republicans are bad, blah, 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 which means nothing.
Well, there has to be a faith, you know, that good faith in the general term of you're walking into not a compliant environment, but at least a receptive environment.
Yeah.
And that's that promise. And I'll get to that, but there's two things. There's finding the 12. This was somebody who said, find 12 people who just want to do good in your neighborhood. They don't have a plan, don't have a specific thing. They just get together every once in a while. It's like, what good thing can we do? And then do it. And 12 seemed to be a good number, not for the biblical reason, but
well,
just mathematically.
He only hit 11 out of 12. So
the social science kind of proved that, of if you can find that small group, you don't want a large group, you want a small group, but you want a bunch of small groups. And then with the internet and degrees of connection, those small groups become large.
Yeah.
Now there's the other thing too of what I notice when I'm watching YouTube of non-Americans are very puzzled by Americans doing two things. They will immediately, when you meet them, tell you what their politics and religion are.
Yeah.
And that doesn't seem to be the case everywhere else.
Right.
So that's an interesting thing. I don't know how that plays out. Mm-hmm. So there's the idea of don't go into if you go into a battle, you're going to have a battle. You know, if you bring a gun, you better use it, kind of thing, and like don't just skip that altogether.
Well, yeah, the thing that is so damaging about that is that we really don't have very many conversations about political issues. We have an assessment, as you were saying. You meet someone, you know, these days it's, are you with Trump or are you against Trump? You know, that's the basic issue. Could you ever vote for the guy?
Right.
Well, then you're part of that team.
That's why I believe there's no undecideds.
Well, the problem is that ends the discussion.
Right.
They don't want to go any further. It's a way of not talking about issues. While we're talking about whether we're red or blue, we're not talking about the intricacies of the health system or what needs to be done in terms of our response to climate issues, or how do we approach the delivery of education in a digital environment. They don't want to talk about that. It's just, are you blue or are you red? It's all simple. We reduce it to just those simple terms. And so you meet someone and you say, oh, you're on the liberal side. Okay, fine. We agree about everything. And that's it. So I find the discussions to be very boring. If I talk to someone who's not on that side, at least the interaction is a little more interesting. If it's a reasonable person, somebody who doesn't want to shout at me. But there are a couple of people that I know, some guys in the neighborhood, and otherwise, we can talk about it, and we know where we're coming from, and we deliberately try not to be, not to be an asshole.
Adversarial.
Yeah,
Right.
Exactly. That you're not criticizing the other person for.
We have a reason not to be adversarial. Like we have a reason. We're
right.
family.
Right.
And my social group has a reason. We're part of a group.
Yeah.
And I like the idea of the 12. This is the thing that's different. The thing you kind of alluded to it there's an underlying current, and it's just individuals, just people, just common people. And the difference today is the internet. We can connect to other people if we so choose. Now that can also be co-opted and used and blah, blah, blah. But I'm wondering, right now there's such a need. I see that yearning for connection, and I see a lot of people not knowing how to do it.
Right.
And so they're overcome by fear and terror. But it also is an opportunity to provide connection. So finding those groups of people that you can talk to, and then slowly expanding those groups or those connections, maybe not the groups, but the connections. So if I had 12 people we could talk to, they have some friends who are slightly different. And so now I can have 6 people and 6 people who are a little bit more different and that's the incrementalism that I want. And I would love to see that. And I think it has to be a promise that you can have connection, but you can't buy your way into it. You can't have it immediately. You have to work for it. But it's a truth that I think would come across, that I think if everybody kind of saw that thing, that I can connect with a small group and they can connect with other groups, and eventually I can have a conversation with someone else without rage. I see the demand for that, but that will take leadership and courage.
Yeah.